She spent 7 years building his crown, but that night he placed it on his mistress. Layla stood outside Stirling Tower, holding a bouquet. Her hands were shaking, but her heart was light. It was their anniversary. She had written a note, "For my king." She pictured his smile, the way he'd pull her close. Then, through the glass, everything changed. Rick was inside, laughing, champagne in hand. Next to him stood the woman who once called Layla sister. Her hand rested on his arm. Her smile claimed him, and the diamond bracelet shining on her wrist. Layla had helped him pick it out. The sound around her faded. The roses slipped from her fingers and fell onto the pavement. Her phone buzzed. Stuck in meetings all night. Don't wait up. Layla looked up again. He kissed the woman. Not a mistake, a choice. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Happy anniversary, Rick." And in that moment, something inside her went silent. Love ended, quietly, brutally, completely. If you've ever loved someone who broke you in public and called it private, stay. Her story is yours. The roses hit the sidewalk, petals scattering like tiny wounds. Her phone buzzed in her purse. Stuck in meetings all night. Don't wait up. The message glowed against the dark, cruel in its simplicity. He was still lying, even as his lips touched another woman. She stared at the screen until the words blurred. For a moment she thought she might scream, but no sound came. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating, endless. 7 years. 7 years of loyalty, laughter, compromises, and pretending. What had it all meant? Was it ever real, or just another one of his perfectly crafted illusions? The night air stung her cheeks, but she didn't move. She wasn't ready to face home, not yet. The city kept spinning around her, people rushing by, headlights flashing. A world still living while hers had stopped. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible, "What have I been living for?" No one answered. Only the hum of traffic, the echo of champagne glasses clinking somewhere above her, and the quiet collapse of everything she thought was safe. And in that silence, something inside her began to break. Not with tears, but with clarity. She drove home without remembering the turns, the streets, the lights. When she stepped inside, the house looked the same. Spotless, curated, lifeless. Every lamp was on, but it still felt dark. On the kitchen counter lay the anniversary card she had written hours earlier. Words of gratitude. Words of love. Lies now. She picked it up and stared at the handwriting that suddenly felt like someone else's. Then she tore it. Once, twice, until the pieces were no bigger than confetti. They fluttered across the marble counter, white against white, meaningless. Her reflection in the glass door caught her off guard. Perfect makeup, perfect dress, perfect mask. The woman staring back looked like a stranger performing a role she didn't audition for. In that sterile, beautiful house, she felt smaller than she ever had. A decoration, a background piece in his success story. The silence pressed on her ears until she couldn't breathe. She leaned against the counter, whispering into the empty air, "This house has everything, except me." The clock ticked. Nothing else moved. Even her tears refused to fall. Upstairs, she opened his closet. The rows of tailored suits stood in perfect order, his kingdom of control. But on the top shelf, behind a stack of sweaters, something didn't fit. A plain, brown shoebox. Her hands trembled as she pulled it down. Inside, receipts. Dozens of them. Hotels, jewelry, restaurants, each one a timestamp of betrayal. Her eyes scanned the dates. 2 years. 2 years of lies perfectly scheduled between meetings and business trips. And he'd spent thousands on another life while telling her to be practical. She waited for the tears again. Nothing. Just a cold calm spreading through her chest. For the first time, she wasn't breaking. She was waking up. Every receipt was proof, every signature a confession. He thought she'd never look. He thought she'd never question. She placed everything back exactly as it was. No trace disturbed. He couldn't know she knew, not yet. She walked downstairs and poured herself a glass of his best wine, the one he was saving for a special occasion. "This is it," she whispered, "the end of blind love, the start of me." The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your bones. She opened her laptop, fingers shaking, and typed into the search bar, "Best divorce lawyers in Atlanta." Names filled the screen, but one stood out. Patricia Okonkwo, a black woman in her 50s, sharp eyes, confident smile. The reviews said she didn't just fight cases, she won them. Layla stared at the photo for a long moment. Patricia looked like someone who had seen everything and feared nothing. Her mouse hovered over the contact button. The old version of her hesitated. The obedient wife, the quiet partner. But that woman was gone. She filled out the form, using her maiden name. When she hit submit, her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with something close to power. She closed the laptop and whispered into the dark, "Tomorrow, I start taking my life back." Outside, the city lights blinked against the night. Somewhere, a man slept soundly beside his lie. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She felt awake. Morning light crept across the kitchen when the doorbell rang. Simone stood there, donut box in one hand, fury in her eyes. "Girl, I told you he was no good," she said, pushing inside before being invited. Layla tried to smile, but it came out broken. She told her everything. The bracelet, the lies, the hotel receipts. Every word felt heavier leaving her lips. Simone listened, jaw tightening, hands gripping the table. When Layla finished, silence filled the space. Then Simone said softly, "You trusted him. That's not stupid. That's love. He's the liar." Layla looked up, tears finally gathering but refusing to fall. "I feel like a fool." "You're not a fool. You're human. You gave your heart to someone who didn't deserve it." For the first time since the betrayal, Layla felt seen. Not as a victim, but as a woman trying to survive. Simone reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You're not alone in this. You've got me. And we're going to make sure he regrets every lie he ever told." Layla nodded slowly. The warmth of sisterhood wrapped around her like armor. For the first time in days, she breathed. Later that afternoon, Layla sat in Rick's home office, scanning documents, searching for financial records. She was almost done when she opened a folder labeled Company HR Reviews. Her name jumped out from the screen. Layla Monroe. Not leadership material. Too aggressive. Her stomach twisted. She scrolled down and found another file. Vanessa Price. Excellent leadership potential. Confident and poised. The same words that once described Layla, only different skin attached to them. For years, she'd worked side by side with Rick, guiding his company from the background. She'd smiled through board meetings where her ideas were dismissed until he repeated them. She'd worn calmness like armor while being called emotional for daring to disagree. Now it was there in writing. The quiet bias she'd always felt but never seen spelled out. Her chest tightened, not just from betrayal as a wife, but as a black woman whose worth was constantly redefined by others. Layla whispered bitterly, "Too aggressive for you, but just right for her." This wasn't only personal anymore. It was systemic, and she was done being polite about it. That night, Layla opened a new account under her maiden name. Each transfer was small, careful, invisible. 500 here, 1,000 there, enough to build freedom without raising suspicion. Then she opened a hidden folder on her laptop. Photos of receipts, tax returns, investment portfolios. She uploaded them all to a cloud Rick didn't know existed. Every click echoed like a heartbeat. Every file saved was a quiet act of rebellion. Her reflection on the screen didn't look fragile anymore. It looked determined. For years, she'd managed his schedules, his image, his empire. Now, she was managing her escape. She paused only once, when she saw a photo from their wedding tucked between folders. 2 smiling faces, young and hopeful. She hovered over the delete key, then pressed it. Freedom didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered through the sound of keys tapping in the dark. And, as the files finished uploading, Layla leaned back, whispering to herself, "He built this empire on my back. Let's see how it stands without me." Patricia Okonkwo's office smelled like strong coffee and quiet confidence. Diplomas lined the wall, each one proof that she'd fought battles and won. Layla laid out her evidence, the receipts, the photos, the dates. Patricia listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes tracking every word. When Layla finished, Patricia leaned back in her chair. "You've been invisible too long, honey. Time to make him see you." Layla exhaled, the words hitting deep. "I don't want revenge. I just want justice." Patricia smiled knowingly. "Justice and revenge often look the same to men like your husband." She slid a card across the desk. "You'll need a private investigator. Facts speak louder than tears." Layla held the card, her pulse steady. "I'll get every fact." "Good," Patricia said, "because the moment you stop begging to be understood and start proving your truth, that's when you win." Layla left the office taller, her footsteps no longer hesitant. The city air felt different, sharp, alive. She wasn't broken anymore. She was in motion. The next morning, she met Jerome at a quiet cafe downtown. He was tall, calm, with eyes that carried both empathy and experience. "Men like him think they're untouchable," he said after hearing her story. "But nobody's above the truth." He showed her a simple contract. "I'll gather everything, photos, videos, timestamps. You'll have proof before he knows I exist." Layla hesitated only for a second before signing. Her hand shook, but her eyes were steady. Jerome nodded approvingly. "That's the look of someone ready to take her power back." She smiled faintly. "It's about time." They discussed strategy, timelines, discretion. He promised results within 2 weeks. As she left the cafe, sunlight spilled across her face. The world hadn't changed. But she had. For the first time in years, Layla wasn't reacting to pain. She was directing it. The war had begun, and she finally believed she could win it. A week later, Jerome sent over the first batch of files. Layla sat at her desk, scrolling through screenshots and records. Most were expected: hotels, credit cards, calls. Then one line stopped her cold. Vanessa Lee wasn't her real name. The document showed another identity: Rachel Miller, born in Portland, Oregon. Layla frowned and typed the name into a public records site. Seconds later, her heart kicked hard. Rachel Miller was married. The husband's name, Thomas Griffin. No divorce record, no separation. She whispered, "She's married." Her voice trembled between disbelief and awe. "And he has no idea." It was more than betrayal now. It was fraud, deception on every level. The mistress wasn't just a thief of affection. She was living under a lie. Layla leaned back, feeling her pulse drum in her ears. The air seemed thinner, sharper. If Vanessa could fake a whole life, she could destroy one too. But not this time. This was her leverage, her first real weapon. She picked up the phone and called Jerome. "I need every record tied to Rachel Miller. We're not done yet." Jerome's voice came through the line the next day. "You were right. Rachel Miller is still legally married. Her husband's name is Thomas Griffin, architect, currently living in Portland." Layla went quiet, then steady. "Book me a ticket." Simone, sitting across the room, stared. "Girl, this could blow up in your face." "Maybe it's time something blows up," Layla said, her tone calm, resolved. She had played quiet for too long. Silent wife, silent worker, silent woman. This time she would look the truth in the eye, no matter how ugly it was. By the next morning she was on a plane, staring out the window, the city fading beneath clouds. Her mind replayed Rick's laughter, Vanessa's smile, every moment that now felt rehearsed. She didn't know what Thomas would be like. She only knew he deserved to know, just like she did. And maybe, together, they could turn pain into something sharper. Thomas Griffin opened the door of a modest house surrounded by sketches and plants. He looked cautious, polite, confused by the stranger on his porch. "Mr. Griffin," she began carefully. "I'm here about your wife." His expression changed, wary. "My wife? Rachel?" He hesitated. "She died 3 years ago." Layla's breath caught. "I'm sorry, but no, she's alive, and she's not Rachel anymore." She took out her phone showing a photo of Vanessa at the Sterling Tower Gala. Thomas stared at it, his face draining of color. "That's her," he whispered. "My wife's alive." He sank into a chair, disbelief shaking through him. "She disappeared after a car accident. They said she drowned. I grieved her." Layla sat across from him, heart pounding. "She's been living under a new name, with my husband." The silence stretched long between them. Two strangers bound by the same lie. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but cold. "Then we both lost everything to the same woman." Layla nodded slowly. "And maybe that means we can get it back." The next morning they met again at a small cafe, papers spread between them. Thomas brought old photos, insurance records, even the fake death certificate. Layla added screenshots, hotel bills, text messages. Together, the pieces formed a web of deceit. Thomas leaned back, jaw tight. "We both got played." Layla looked him in the eye. "Then let's end their game together." They spent hours outlining what needed to happen. Timing, witnesses, legal proof. The plan took shape. Expose the affair and the fraud at the upcoming company gala. Thomas nodded. "She'll be there. She loves attention." "And so will he," Layla replied. "Perfect." It wasn't revenge for the sake of pain. It was justice, clean and sharp. When they parted, there was no awkwardness, only understanding. Two lives broken by the same betrayal, now walking toward truth side by side. As she drove away, Layla felt something new stirring inside her. Not rage, not grief, but control. For the first time in years, she wasn't following anyone's lead. She was writing the next move. Back in Atlanta, Layla gathered her circle. Patricia, Jerome, Simone. Files covered the table like war maps. Every line, every date, every lie was marked in red. Patricia handled the legal angles. Jerome arranged surveillance. Simone kept Layla steady, reminding her to eat, to rest, to breathe. They called it the campaign. But it wasn't chaos. It was precision. Layla chose her armor. A deep red dress. "If I'm going down," she said quietly, "I'll look like fire." Jerome chuckled. "You're not going down. You're burning the crown." Simone raised her glass of iced coffee. "To the Queen, returning to her throne." Layla smiled faintly. "No, to the woman who built it in the first place." The room fell silent. Not from fear, but reverence. Outside, thunder rolled across the Atlanta sky. Inside, every heartbeat carried one promise. By the time the gala lights dimmed, truth would shine brighter than diamonds. The game was set, and this time the crown was hers to destroy. Sterling Tower shimmered with gold lights and camera flashes. The annual gala was Rick Carter's stage, his kingdom on display. He entered with Vanessa on his arm, her dress silver, her smile practiced. They looked like power wrapped in lies. Conversations paused when the doors opened again. Layla stepped in, dressed in red that caught every reflection, Thomas Griffin by her side. The hush spread like ripples through water. Thomas leaned close, whispering, "You look incredible." Her eyes stayed forward. "I'm not here to look. I'm here to end this." Every step she took was deliberate, calm, royal. People turned to stare, whispers rising. Rick's laughter faltered when he saw her. Vanessa's smile cracked for the first time that night. Layla held her chin high, her gaze steady on the stage. She wasn't the wife left behind anymore. She was the reckoning walking through the door. For the first time in years, the power in the room didn't belong to Rick. It was hers. And by the end of the night, everyone would know it. Rick adjusted his tie and took the microphone, confidence radiating through his voice. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate excellence, loyalty, brilliance, and integrity." Layla felt her jaw tighten. She could predict every line before he said it. He gestured toward Vanessa. This woman has stood by my side, carried vision and grace through every challenge. Please join me in congratulating our new Vice President, Vanessa Lee." Applause filled the room. Loud, false, obedient. Layla's pulse pounded. She looked at Thomas, who met her gaze and nodded once. She whispered, "Now." They rose together, walking toward the stage as the crowd began to notice. Heads turned. The music stopped. Rick smiled uncertainly. "Layla?" he said into the microphone, voice cracking slightly, but she didn't answer. Thomas stepped forward, eyes locked on Vanessa. The night was about to split open, and every truth buried beneath their lies was ready to surface. Thomas climbed the steps to the stage, voice calm but cutting through the air. "Congratulations, Mrs. Griffin." The room froze. Glasses lowered. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Rick blinked. "What did you just say?" Thomas held up a document. "Your vice president, my wife." Layla joined him, her tone clear and sharp. "You heard him right. She's married." The color drained from Vanessa's face. Rick's hand dropped from her back. "Her real name is Rachel Miller," Layla continued, "and she's been lying to everyone in this room." Phones came out, cameras flashing. Gasps echoed. Rick stumbled over his words. That's impossible." "Is it?" Layla asked. "Or just inconvenient?" Vanessa tried to speak, but her voice broke. The truth hung between them. Undeniable, heavy, public. Layla didn't smile. Justice didn't need a smile. It only needed to be seen. And tonight, it was. The silence broke into chaos. Vanessa reached for Rick's hand, pleading, "Please, I can explain." Rick yanked his hand away. "Explain what? That you lied about your name, your marriage, our company?" Layla pulled a folder from her bag, her voice steady. "All the hotels, all the jewelry, paid from company funds." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters raised their phones higher. Rick turned pale. "You went through my records?" "You went through my life," she replied. Flashes lit the stage. Jerome's contacts were already leaking documents to the press. Patricia had timed everything perfectly. Vanessa's knees buckled. Rick's mask shattered. Layla stood in the center, unshaken. This was not revenge. It was truth catching up. By the time the first headline hit social media, the Sterling Tower Gala had become history. The empire they built on lies was collapsing in real time. And she was the one holding the match. The room trembled with whispers as the board members gathered, all men in dark suits, all stunned. One of them muttered, "This is outrageous." Layla turned to face them, her eyes bright and steady. "Outrageous? You called me too aggressive for this job. Well," she paused, her voice rising, "tonight you'll see what aggressive can do." A hush followed, thick and electric. Then, from the corner of the room, a small sound. Applause. A woman, one of the younger executives, clapped once. Another joined. Then another. The men shifted uncomfortably, their silence louder than any defense. Layla didn't need their approval. Not anymore. She glanced at Rick, who stood frozen beside Vanessa, his empire burning around him. Every word she spoke that night would outlive the scandal. For every woman ever called too much, too loud, too strong, she had just proven there was no such thing. And as the applause grew, Layla simply stood tall, the embodiment of every too aggressive woman finally seen. Rick tried to take to the microphone, his voice rising above the noise. "Everyone, calm down. This is a misunderstanding." But no one was listening. Investors whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Phones buzzed with news alerts. A few quietly left the room. Vanessa stumbled, mascara streaking down her face. Then the doors opened. 2 police officers stepped inside. One of them spoke clearly. "Vanessa Miller, you're under investigation for fraud and identity deception." Gasps filled the hall. Cameras flashed again. Rick's face twisted, desperate. "You ruined everything," he shouted at her. Layla's voice cut through the chaos, cold and even. "No, you did." She didn't raise her tone. She didn't need to. The weight of truth had already done the damage. Rick looked around. But the empire he'd built on charm and deceit was collapsing right in front of him. Investors, allies, friends, gone. As Vanessa was led away, Layla turned toward the exit. Her heart was steady, her steps light. For the first time, he was the one left standing in the ruins, and she, finally, was free of them both. The morning news looped the same headline: Angry Wife Causes Scene at Charity Gala. Clips of her standing on stage played again and again, her calm mistaken for rage. Commentators debated her tone, her dress, her attitude, everything but the truth. Layla sat on her couch, the TV's blue light washing over her face. She watched herself in silence, then reached for the remote and turned it off. For a long moment, the room was still. Then her voice, low, certain, filled the quiet. "They call me angry," she said, "but they never ask why." She thought about all the years she swallowed her feelings to be acceptable, agreeable, safe. About every time she'd been told to smile more, to speak softer, to be less. Now, the world could call her whatever it wanted. She knew what she was. A woman who finally refused to shrink. The label didn't sting anymore. It sounded like freedom. A week later, Patricia called. "He wants to settle quickly," she said. "Full division of assets, the house, and 4 years of spousal support." Layla paused, eyes on the morning sun spilling across her kitchen table, the same table where she once planned his success. "Tell him to double it," she replied. Patricia chuckled softly. "That's bold." So was betraying me. There was no bitterness in her tone, only clarity. This wasn't revenge, it was balance. Patricia exhaled. "I'll make the call. You just keep living your best life." When the call ended, Layla felt the strange calm of someone who no longer needed to fight for acknowledgement. The world might still debate her story, but the ending belonged to her. She brewed coffee, the scent filling the quiet house. For the first time, she realized she didn't feel lonely. She felt powerful. Money wasn't the victory. Dignity was. Rick showed up at her door unannounced, thinner, paler, eyes ringed with regret. He stood there like a ghost who didn't know he was dead. "Layla," he started, voice cracked, "can we fix this?" She looked at him for a long time. The man she once loved, the dream she once chased. There was pity in her gaze, but not forgiveness. "You broke it, Rick," she said quietly. "I'm just walking away from the wreck." He tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back. The space between them felt wider than it ever had. "I never meant to hurt you," he whispered. "You just never meant to stop," she replied. He lowered his head, words failing him. When the door closed behind him, the air felt lighter. The chapter that once defined her was finally finished. No tears, no anger, just release. Some endings don't come with closure. They come with peace. Days later, Layla sat in Patricia's office, pen in hand. The divorce papers waited in front of her. Black ink on white paper, years of her life condensed into a few lines. She signed without hesitation. "This," she said softly, "is the first contract I've ever signed for myself." Patricia smiled, eyes warm. "Freedom suits you, honey." Layla returned the smile. "Feels like it was tailored." They both laughed quietly. The sound was light, unburdened. Outside the window, Atlanta buzzed. Same city, different life. As she stepped out of the office, the world felt wide again. She wasn't Rick's wife anymore. She wasn't someone's background story. She was Layla Monroe, whole, alive, and finally her own. Freedom didn't roar that day. It whispered her name, and she listened. Weeks later, Patricia forwarded an update from the police. Vanessa, or Rachel Miller, had confessed. She'd run the same scam on men across 3 states: love, money, and disappearance. She had faked her death once, started over twice, and used every man as her next stepping stone. Rick wasn't the first. He was just the latest. Layla read the report quietly, her face unreadable. For a moment she thought she might feel pity, but it never came. When Rick called, desperate to explain, she answered once. His voice was tired, almost broken. "I was a fool," he said. She didn't argue. She only replied, "You built your empire on lies. She just beat you at your own game." He said nothing after that. The silence felt final, like a door closing forever. Layla ended the call, then deleted his number. The story was over, the damage done. But what he lost in power, she gained in peace. Justice hadn't come through pity, it had come through truth. And this time, it belonged entirely to her. Months passed. The headlines faded, the noise died down. Layla found herself craving something quiet, something real. She took a position teaching communications at a local college. The first day, she stood in front of 20 curious faces, young women, bright and fearless. For the first time, she didn't feel like someone's wife or someone's shadow. She felt like herself. After class, a student asked, "Why did you decide to teach?" Layla smiled. "After years of teaching him how to win, I'm ready to teach myself how to live." Her voice was calm, but the words carried the weight of everything she had survived. At night, she graded papers at her kitchen table, jazz humming softly in the background. It wasn't luxury, it was life. Unpolished, authentic, hers. Freedom, she learned, wasn't loud. It was found in quiet mornings and honest work. And, for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. One afternoon, as she packed up after class, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Didn't think I'd find you this easily." Thomas Griffin stood in the doorway, a rolled blueprint under his arm. He'd moved to Atlanta for a new architectural project. They hadn't spoken in months, but the ease between them returned instantly. Over coffee, they caught up. No drama, no ghosts, just two people who understood what loss had taught them. Thomas smiled, gentle but sure. "We've both been burned," he said. "Maybe it's time to build from ashes." Layla looked at him, realizing it wasn't about romance or repair. It was about rebuilding trust, in the world, in herself. She nodded. "Maybe it is." The sunlight through the cafe window hit his blueprints, turning the paper gold. For the first time in a long time, she felt possibility instead of pain. Sometimes healing didn't come with fireworks. It came with coffee, quiet, and someone who understood the ruin, and stayed anyway. A year later, Layla bought a small house on the edge of the city. White walls, a tiny garden, and a porch that caught the morning sun. She planted flowers along the fence, slow and steady. She adopted a dog, a scruffy brown mutt she named Charlie. He followed her everywhere, tail always wagging. Each morning began the same way. Coffee brewing, jazz playing low, sunlight stretching across the kitchen floor. She didn't have diamonds or status anymore, but she had peace, the kind that couldn't be bought or broken. As she watered her plants, she thought of everything she'd lost, and how none of it mattered anymore. "I don't need a crown anymore," she whispered. "I just need peace." Charlie barked once as if agreeing. She laughed, the sound soft but full. For the first time in years, her laughter didn't echo off empty walls. It belonged to a life rebuilt from truth, and that was enough. A year later, Layla stood before her students, chalk in hand. The board behind her read, "Courage in Communication." She smiled at the class. "Sometimes," she said, "losing everything is how you find yourself. Sometimes the crown you built wasn't meant to be worn, but to remind you of your worth." The students watched her closely, some nodding, some quietly taking notes. She felt the words settle in the room, gentle but powerful, like a truth they'd remember. After class, she walked outside into the afternoon sun. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. She'd lost love, wealth, and illusion. But she'd found peace, strength, and purpose. As she closed the classroom door, her voice lingered like a promise. To every woman who's ever been told she's too much, keep being exactly that. Her story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebirth. And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself, share her story. Someone else needs the reminder.